foreign bank accounts before 30th June 2019. So the same evidence is being required even if somebody declares I have foreign liquid assets and I'm not repatriating them to Pakistan, and it's okay, I'll pay a bit of higher tax rate, that's fine by me. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, there could be genuine economic reason. You might be actually concerned for one of the various reasons. Maybe the prospect in your relevant sector are not so good. Maybe you require liquidity in the country you are residing, or whatever the reason. Fair enough. Or could it be that you want to manipulate the system? That couldn't be so good. Okay, that couldn't be so good. So the evidence is required to ensure that one is not manipulating the system and they actually hold the cash and the foreign liquid assets. Just like I explained for the local system, if somebody do not have the foreign liquid cash they are declaring and no evidence is required, they can still use that to manipulate and underreport future earnings. So what they have tried to do is actually attempted to close that loophole. Similarly, we also have this requirement that any foreign liquid assets repatriated to Pakistan under this scheme are required to be deposited into the declarant's own bank account locally or invested in Pakistan Banao certificates or any foreign currency denominated bonds issued by the federal government. So if the foreign liquid assets are not repatriated, provide evidence they are in the foreign bank account, pay higher tax rates. Foreign liquid assets repatriated to Pakistan, deposit them either in the local bank account of yourself or invest them in the Pakistan Banao certificate or one of the foreign currency denominated bonds issued by the federal government. Or if the cash is held in Pakistan, show that it is in your bank account and retain it till 30th June 2019. So these are some of the important exclusions, important conditions for the declaration. Now let's talk about some exclusions which are not covered within this amnesty's framework. But before I move on to the exclusions, I think it's time to take some of your questions. Do we have any?
Yes, there is a question. Which is about the difference between undisclosed and Benami assets.
Okay, that's a very good question. Benami asset has now been defined under the Benami legislation, although that's not the topic of today's session, but since you have asked and it's somewhat relevant, I'll answer to clarify. An undeclared is an asset that you probably and most likely hold in your own name, but you have not declared that. So maybe you had a property which you haven't shown. Maybe you brought a piece of land. Maybe you had a car. Maybe you made some investment in some shares, etc., etc. But you have not disclosed that to the government, to the regulatory authorities. A Benami asset, on the other hand, is an asset which is not held in your name. So the question of the disclosure is out of the question because you have not shown that in your name. So obviously you won't be disclosing, but the point is you have not shown that in your name. However, under the Benami Act, if I recall correctly, the assets that fulfill certain conditions, like they are in the name of your first blood relations and declared by them, they are now not referred to as Benami. Benami would be held by, for example, in the name of your employee, in the name of your cook, in the name of a distant cousin, and you have not declared them. They are referred to as Benami asset. So if we want to make it simple, as a crux, we can say an undisclosed asset is something that you have held legitimately in your name, but you have not properly disclosed it. So you are violating the law by keeping it hidden. A Benami asset, on the other hand, is which you have criminally tried to hide by holding it in the name of another person when actually you are the legitimate owner of that asset. I hope that makes it clear. Next.
I have this question. Do you think it would be appropriate if a restriction would have imposed to keep the amount for at least 45 days in bank account, irrespective of the date 30th June?
I think that would have been more just, that would give a level playing field to everyone. It's actually a fantastic idea, and I was just thinking about similar introduction that it should have been made, because as we have discussed, the people who would be availing amnesty near the end dates would actually be benefiting more in terms of the cash flow management, if nothing else. So yeah, I'm on board with you on that. Next, please.
What are the chances of this amnesty scheme succeeding where previous ones have failed? What might be the scheme features that might contribute to its success or failure?
The million-dollar question. Well, we actually have an entire session, the last session of this presentation dedicated to this question. So let's hold our horses here, and I promise we'll be answering that in extensive detail. Next.
Does a Benami asset mean any asset acquired from the proceeds of any criminal activity?
Okay, I've just given you the answer to the Benami asset, but to answer your question, it can or it cannot be. It might be that the proceeds were absolutely legitimate, but you are not declaring it, and now by not declaring it, you have committed an illegal act. So effectively, they now become proceeds from an illegal act, because you might be trying to evade the taxes, which is not legal. Normally, we associate Benami with some criminal activity. It's not necessary. It can be the proceeds of criminal activity, or it can be the proceeds of non-criminal activity, but held in the Benami name to dodge the tax authorities. And thereby doing that, it becomes a criminal activity in itself. Next. Okay, great. So let's continue. Meanwhile, you can just write the questions in the dialog box if you have any. So, before the questions, we were talking about the exclusions. So right now we have talked about a little brief history of the tax amnesties in Pakistan. And if you notice, you might have noticed that generally, other than General Zia's amnesty, the amnesties during the period of military rule have been very successful. And the amnesty during the civilian rule have not been so successful. What do you think is the reason? Any feedback? And purely from a professional perspective. That's what I'm looking for in the answers.
Gulrez Raza is saying, did not get the term in question. Is it Benami assets or as in no-name assets?
Benami asset. You have translated that in English, but both in the Ordinance and the Benami Act is referred to as Benami.
Fiza is facing issues with audio.
Okay, I'll give you guys 30 seconds to give your responses, and then I'll move on.
Repeat the question.
Okay, the question is, when we went through the brief history of tax amnesties in Pakistan, starting from Ayub Khan's era in 1958, right up to 2019, we noticed that the amnesties during military rule have been comparatively more successful. The most successful being in General Musharraf's tenure. The amnesties during civilian rule have not been that successful. What is the professional reason, in your opinion, for that?
Irfan Ali's opinion, not very professional though, but saying I think people are afraid of army. They can enforce the rule of law.
Okay.
But if I was to give an answer, if I'm allowed to, I think just because there were politicians who were allowed to participate in the asset declaration or the amnesty scheme during, and those were the bigger culprits who had Benami assets in their names, and therefore they used it as an opportunity, wasn't it?
Well, we can say that about General Musharraf's, fair enough, fair point. How about the success of Ayub Khan's? He didn't allow that. Are we good with the internet? Good to go? Great. Okay, did we receive any other response yet?
There are other responses.
So I'll take 2-3 more.
Okay. There's another one, sort of more carefully written.
Okay.
People respect and trust army.
Okay.
It's another response. Hamad Ahmed is saying accountability. Nuruddin Imani is saying because they allowed politicians to participate. Similar answer.
He copied your answer.
Faiz Ali Khan saying people trust military governments more than they trust public governments. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Let me address that for you. Actually, before I give you the answer, let me just help you recall the last amnesty, and you'll all get the answer yourself. If you remember the last amnesty in 2018, there was a lot of uncertainty. People were saying it would be challenged in the court and all, and the results were really, really low. Hardly anybody was availing the amnesty. Then, a few days, I think it was less than 2 weeks, if I remember correctly, before the amnesty ends, the Supreme Court declared that it's none of the business of the Supreme Court. It's the business of the state to do that. And Supreme Court would not be entertaining any petitions in this regard. And once that was 2018, and once that was announced, within less than 2 weeks, boom.
Yeah, because once Supreme Court had taken up the case, there was a level of uncertainty in the marketplace whether
That's the keyword I was looking for. So there are 2 reasons. Market businesses hate uncertainty, and second is enforcement. What happens is generally there is uncertainty around any amnesty scheme. With dictatorial rule, because most of the institutions and state organs are unified in that uncertainty is removed. That if there is this thing, then all the state organs are on the same page and it would be enforced. And the classic example of that is the 2018 amnesty. As soon as the amnesties, as soon as the uncertainty relating to the amnesty was removed, it became a success. So let's move forward after we had that interesting discussion. And no, it's not because people love one institution more or the second. That may be a patriotic thing and very good, but not the topic of today's session. Remember, nobody loves to pay taxes in the world. If you say to people, come and pay voluntarily, nobody, not even in the developed countries. It always has to be a balanced approach, the cost-benefit approach or stick-and-carrot approach, done in a very professional manner, properly implemented, sans any confusion or suspicions. So let's move forward.
I think from a professional perspective, ACC has maintained the right tone. I mean, coming up with a research report that has a title, Tax as a Force for Good. I mean, unless professionals develop that, frame of mind, the tax is not something bad. Tax is something that is good for the countries and the nations. I think that will probably help us.
I totally agree, and ACC is playing a very important role in that. I mean, personally, I'm proud to share that MLCC, being the pioneer ACC and legal practicing firm, we advise all our clients to do the right thing, and that now, particularly now that all the systems are being integrated, databases being built, OECD being enforced, it's even from the business perspective in their own interest to have everything properly accounted for and pay their due taxes. The problem with Pakistan is a problem of perception. Perception is stronger than reality. We often have this discussion on the tax committee avenue as well, that one of the prime reason people cite is that they have to take care of everything themselves, so why should they pay the taxes? The state say, if you don't pay us the taxes, how can we improve the system? So it's like that dilemma of who came first, the egg or the chicken, right? And so people are saying first the government start delivering, then we'll start paying taxes. The state is saying we are improving the system, start paying the taxes, and we'll continuously improve the system. which in my opinion is the logical way to go forward. So let's move forward with that. Next up are the exclusions. So importantly, the ordinance, or as it is commonly referred to as the amnesty, is not applicable to the following. Number one, the holders of public office and their dependents, as well as any of their benomigas. So it's a pretty nice clause which covers up that particular area of misuse or abuse by politically exposed persons. So anybody who is holding a public office, not just a politician, so even the bureaucrats, even the generals, anybody who is holding a public office cannot avail their amnesty. So hey, what's the problem? I'll just get it done in my wife's name. No, you can't. Even your dependents can't do that. Okay, no problem. Chaudhry Allah Deta, my driver, he'll do that. No, you can't even do that in the name of your benefit. So far, so good. One of the lacunas that is left, and we are waiting for FPR's rules to be finalized and released for that, is how would it be assessed that who is a public office holder or their dependent or their benomiga. And this is the same critique that was raised on 2018's amnesty as well. It also said that the holders of public office and their dependents can't avail that, but it didn't introduce any mechanism to find out who is the holder of the public office or their dependent. For example, Mrs. Razia Shahnawaz avails the amnesty. What mechanism would there be to ensure that she is not the dependent of a public office holder? So since the FPR rules are in the feedback stage at the moment, this is something for which we have to wait and see how it is being addressed or not in the rules. But with regard to the ordinance, as far as the law is concerned, they have introduced this clause to try to stop that abuse. A public company, as defined under clause 47 of section 2 of the income tax ordinance, cannot avail that. Fair enough, public funds are involved, so they shouldn't be allowed that. But what this means is that the private companies would be able to avail this, right? Because the exclusion only excludes the public company, not the private one. So that's how you have to read between the line and interpret the law. Matters where proceedings are pending in the court of law, certainly if the matter is pending in the court of law, you can't avail the amnesty. Perhaps if you want to, with the agreement of the concerning officers and the FPR, withdraw your case and then avail the amnesty, which can be a pretty good idea. I mean, if you are not very confident and the amnesty is offering you a 2% rate, otherwise you might end up paying 28, 30%. Well, it's a golden opportunity. But if you are not certain, that means the counterparty, the taxman, is more certain. In which case, why would they agree for you to withdraw the case from the court of law? They would rather have the court decide that. Anyway, matters where the proceedings have attained finality under the respective tax laws, again, in that scenario, you cannot avail the tax amnesty. Furthermore,